Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Bipolar Saga with your host, me, Cormac. No last name, not happening. Wearing this, actually, to hide my identity. If I hit 100K subscribers, I will remove all of my face mask or whatever and do a face reveal. But for now, I'm going to keep it anonymous. And in this first episode, I am going to describe to you my first manic episode, which happened when I was 24 years old. And I'm going to relay all of the awful things that preceded it and followed it. And when I say awful, people, I mean awful. So we'll get right into it, really. Right now I'll tell you a little bit about myself and about my background. I'm a 40-year-old guy. I live in the Northeast United States. I'm educated. I have a bachelor's and a master's in clinical psychology. And I have a doctorate in law, but I don't practice law. Those of you with bipolar disorder will understand sort of employment stress, and probably those with you who don't have bipolar disorder or any kind of mental illness understand probably how stressful the job of being an attorney is and why I don't practice law. But let's keep that for another episode, and we'll get right into it with a little bit of my background about mental illness and about bipolar disorder. So part one. I started having what I would say to be symptoms of mental illness when I was about 18 or 19 years old. Primarily then it was a struggle with depression, anxiety, and ADHD. I was an emotional guy growing up. I was shy, and so forth. So a lot of that, I chalked up to, what was anxiety and what was depression, I chalked up to loneliness or being shy or, having maybe a low stress threshold and things like this. I didn't know that what was happening was there was actually a nuclear bomb of mental hell that was being assembled in there, and I was just getting some of the initial radioactivity from it. But I started basically in college having symptoms of mental illness, primarily depression and anxiety. ADHD, of course. Those of you with bipolar are going to know right away. These go hand in hand. And I was really scared of treating it. I was really sort of shy. I would call psychologists' offices and hang up. I would make appointments and I wouldn't show up. Back then, the idea to me of going into an office, a psychiatrist or a psychologist, was absolutely, maybe the most sort of mortifying or humiliating experience I could imagine. No one in my family has anything like that or has had anything like that. So I was going in alone, and I think that made the shame and the apprehension a little bit worse. So it wasn't until my junior year that things got bad. My junior year in college. I was 21 years old, and I was struggling. I was so anxious and I was so depressed. I was struggling with a lot of sort of obsessive-based anxiety. Obsessing about, things like you're not intelligent, you're not good enough. And these kind of things would go through my mind all of the time. And I could tell that something was seriously wrong. I could tell that it had gone outside of, I'm kind of an emotional guy who's, gets sad or, tends toward the melancholy, to where I'm like, okay, I have an illness here. There's something going on with my brain. It very much sort of centered itself there where I was like, all right, you know what? I have this shame and so forth, or this embarrassment about going to speak to a psychiatrist, a psychologist. But then it became like, wow, I'm on fire, and someone needs to put it out, and that someone is a psychiatrist. And so for those of you with bipolar disorder who are watching this, you'll probably be able to sympathize with this. I started the basic, your entry-level psych treatment, where I was put on Zoloft, I was put on clonazepam. And this was my sort of beginning into taking care of myself as a psych patient. And so I was on some variation of these for the next couple of years. I told you that the manic episode jumped off when I was 24. And so I'm 21 here. I'm getting on antidepressants for the first time. I'm getting on anti-anxiety agents for the first time. And I'm getting some improvement, actually. I'd say by the next year, my senior year, I was normalized to the idea of going to a psychiatrist, of refilling my meds, of taking antidepressants, taking anti-anxiety medications, and doing better. All in all, doing better. It sort of cleared up what I was talking about in terms of, panic, anxiety, obsession, depression. But I wasn't completely good, So I graduate from college, and I go out, and I had taken a teaching position somewhere while I was doing graduate work. And I was having trouble keeping up. I was having trouble going to sleep, and I was having trouble getting out of bed. This will be familiar to a lot of you as well. Maybe even just some of you regular folk who are tuning into this. So I left that position, and I went and I lived with really the girl who I think probably would have been the love of my life if it were not for this manic episode. I moved in with her. We had a small apartment in the Midwest. I was seeing a psychiatrist out there, and I was taking antidepressants, anti-anxiety agents, and I was taking ADHD medication. And I was 23 years old. And I will tell you what, the year preceding my manic episode, it felt like, dang, I've got this under control. I take these 3 medicines and I'm good to go, I'm good to go. This is it. Because I had sort of washed out of the graduate program by that point, and moved. I didn't say that, so I'll say that now. So I'm living with this lovely girl who I loved her to death. She was perfect for me. We had the best sort of relationship. I'm an artist. She was an artist. I'm a homebody. She wasn't really a homebody. And it was a nice compliment, So I would basically stay in the apartment for this next year, working like crazy. I'm a painter and I write music and so forth. I'm not trying to promote any of that here. And I was just doing that. And we had a lovely relationship. It was fantastic. My mood issues seemed to be settled. I was productive. I was happy. I was a self-starter. Things were going really, really well. And I was really happy then. And it's funny that I would look back and say, man, that was like the happiest year of my life. And then this manic episode happens. It makes you wonder, well, dang, was I hypomanic, during that period? And looking back, I can't say one way or the other for sure. I might have just been happy. I might have been well treated, but that's the thing with bipolar disorder is that, I'm not really sure if you have any mood that is completely detached from it. You're still a person, of course, and, you have happiness and sadness and whatever at a regular level. But, yeah, I can't tell if I was hypomanic during that period because I was very happy and I was very productive. Now, for those of you who are psychiatrists, psych patients, whatever, I was taking Effexor, Vyvanse, and clonazepam. Well, 23 was a great year for me. Fantastic year. I'm in a lovely relationship with a fantastic girl. We're so in love. I'm so happy. We're sharing a small little studio apartment in a hip city in the Midwest. I'm not going to say which one. Right around my 24th birthday, my psychiatrist switched my antidepressant from Effexor to a medicine called Prestige. Okay, Sounds good to me. We're having good results so far. Bring the Prestique in. Let's toss the Effexor. I started on the Effexor, and things started getting weird from there. Things started getting bad from there. I started to become more irritable. I started sleeping less. I started to feel detached from this person that I cared so much about, and I couldn't really explain why. And that was about the first 2 weeks on it. And she noticed it as well. And it seemed like our relationship was deteriorating. But not so much where it was collapsing, but where it was deteriorating enough to where I asked specifically, and I remember this, on my birthday, just to have the apartment to myself. I don't know why, but I wanted it to myself. And I remember that night on my birthday. So I've been on Prestique for 3 weeks now. My girlfriend has noticed that my behavior has changed, that I'm irritable, that I'm not sleeping, that I'm starting to speak kind of fast. I'm starting to have what they call pressured speech. I remember on that birthday being in the apartment alone, hanging out, doing whatever, and I was on the computer, and this is where it switches. This is where it switches into manic, psychotic features, which I would not understand for some months. And I was on the computer, just doing my normal website browsing or whatever, standard stuff that you're doing. This was scrolling back in the day. This was in 2009. 2009, yeah. So basically scrolling back then was a site called Tumblr. And I had a Tumblr and she had a Tumblr. And I was on Tumblr, as I was pretty frequently. I used to post art there. I used to post music there. And I started reading, this one Tumblr, and I started convincing myself. I wasn't convinced myself. I was absolutely convinced that one of the Tumblrs that I was following and that was following me was posting love stories, love poems, and what have you, about me. And that the person doing the posting, this gets a little complicated, was my college best friend, his girlfriend. I thought that my best friend in college, his girlfriend, had a Tumblr page. She was following mine, and that she was writing stories about us, and she was posting sort of daily content and daily, I don't know what you'd call it, just either spoken word poetry or actual essay form sort of pieces of prose that were all about me and us and her secret love for me. So I'm reading this, I remember, and my girlfriend had agreed for whatever. It's a strange request, right? Looking back on it, here's what you can do for my birthday. Get out. Obviously I was irritable. I was isolating. These are all sort of pre-manic features, depressive features, these mixed symptom features. Yeah. Hey, it's my birthday. What do you want me to do? Get the fuck, get out of the apartment. And I remember I stayed up that whole night scrolling this Tumblr and reading everything and thinking it's about me, okay? These posts are about me. This girl who is my best friend in college, let's call him Matt. Matt's girlfriend was writing things about me, and she was in love with me. And I was discovering this on the computer. I had put this together, somehow my powers, the powers of my mind had solved this. And it was his girlfriend, let's call her Kim, writing love stories about me because she was in love with me and she couldn't approach me, couldn't talk about it because we had a best friend between us and I had a girlfriend. Well, the truth was that in college for some years I did have a crush on my best friend's girlfriend. I did have have a crush on Kim. Forgive me for how, like if I'm talking and it sounds messed up or whatever, or if I mess up words or phrases. I'm not used to doing this. And so I'm convinced that Kim is writing me love letters and that she's in love with me and that she's not in love with her boyfriend. And like I said, by that time, I was isolating myself from my girlfriend, which I would regret for the next million years. Everything that happened, but looking back now, I can be sort of sympathetic and understand that I was manic. I was becoming manic, and that I wasn't really in control. I was out of the driver's seat by this point, and the car was moving fast, and it was moving towards dangerous territory. So I made this discovery that night, right? This discovery, which is just a delusion. This was the first time I had become delusional. For those of you out there who use the term delusional and in arguments with people that you don't like or, toss it around, this is what a delusion looks like. It looks like this, me on the computer and reading something and thinking it's about me. From my graduate psychology courses and undergraduate psychology degree, these are called delusions of reference. So I was having delusions of reference that Kim was writing about me and that she was in love with me, and it thrilled me, honestly. It thrilled me with love. It filled me with love because this was sort of unrequited, never spoken of ever in college. You have feelings about your best friend's girlfriend. You're taking it to the grave. Done deal. But here I am discovering this little website, which is not, it was just some random person's Tumblr or something like that, or several Tumblrs as it would become. I was just reading trash. It could have been anything. And I'm even of the opinion now that I could have been actually hallucinating what was on the screen and that there were no Tumblrs involved. And that's a very good possibility by the way things go from here. So I spend that night looking at that and I'm rolling this little secret around inside of me like, oh my gosh, Kim is in love with me, I really had a crush on her and I knew something was there and man, this is it. How am I going to act on this? I'm in a relationship where I'm all of a sudden not really happy in, and so forth. And so my then girlfriend comes back to the apartment the next day. I keep this to myself, but I save the website. And on every spare moment, I'm looking at it. And in every moment that I look at it, I'm convinced that she's writing about me, that she's reaching out to me. So it didn't take long from that for me to sort of completely just shut myself down to my then girlfriend, who I'll tell you what, I look back at this and a lot of you with bipolar disorder have been through the same thing, where you've probably lost what you look back and go, that was the love of my life. And this was probably the love of my life that I was with, this girl, and I'll call her Jess. Jess was so wonderful, so perfect for me, so kind, and she really loved me, But as I went from hypomanic to manic, I shut down to her, and I sort of shifted all of my love to Kim and this idea that she's reaching out to me secretly because we can't get around her boyfriend, because we can't get around my girlfriend, and all the history there. Well, a week went by, and I wasn't really sleeping anymore. Things started to get blurry, and I know that's such a cliche way of putting it, but it was as if the days just sort of melded into each other. And it's hard for me to believe because it would take 3 weeks before this got insanely bad, which you'll hear about. But it took about 3 weeks from there for this to go to absolute chaos. And I don't remember sleeping during it, but I'm sure I didn't, stay awake the whole time. So she comes back. I'm now delusional. I don't know that I'm delusional. I'm a guy who's being treated for depression, anxiety, ADHD. Delusions? What? Are you kidding me? Those are people who are walking around on the street, with tinfoil on their head. I kept reading the website. I kept going back to it. I would stay up late after she went to bed reading it. It took about 5 days for me to say, you know what, I'm going to reach out to Kim directly because I love her too, right? I'm fully manic now, pretty much getting there. And I'm discovering, no, this is my future. This thing right here. This is what it's about for me, And I reach out to her. I write her an email saying something like, hey, I think I didn't want her. I wanted to give the impression that I hadn't found the website, that I was just reaching out, that I had been sort of longing for her the same way that she had been longing for me in this delusion. And so I think I wrote something like, whatever. I'm not even going to say it. It's too embarrassing. And, these things are too embarrassing, especially things that are romantic. I think I said, so I'll just say it because it's so embarrassing. I said something about I have such a wild heart for you. And, I felt this way for so long. And, I could never say it because Matt's my best friend. And, things like this. Whatever. Sappy, whatever. Insanity. Literal insanity. But I guess it came off as just me overstepping my best friendship with Matt and coming on to his girl, which exactly what it was in a normal world. And she wrote back pretty quickly to it, actually. And this was all secret. I was carrying this on while still living with my girlfriend, but we were fighting severely. She was telling me, there's something wrong with you. You're speaking fast all the time. You have no patience for me. You've changed. There's something different since you changed from this medicine effects to this medicine prestige. I couldn't notice anything. To me, I was like, I'm beginning this grand adventure of my life. This is what was really waiting for me. This is what God had waiting for me. I couldn't be bothered with what she was saying. By that time, I was halfway out the door in my mind. I had already started thinking, okay, I'm leaving the Midwest. I'm going to the South to be with her. Because that was the idea I had gotten from her Tumblr. That she was calling me to, live with her and to start a relationship, start a marriage, something. She wrote back pretty much flat out, yeah, I don't see you that way. I don't see you that way. I'd appreciate it if you didn't write me something like this again. Whoa. Right? For me, I'm like, oh, what's going on here? We're on a closed line between us. I'm reading your Tumblr all the time. You can tell me this. Why does she have to tell me this on email that she's not into me? And so the delusion sort of enhanced from there. That Matt was watching and monitoring her emails and that he had intercepted this. And written back to me this response, which was sort of terse and semi-polite. It was polite enough. It was just, I don't feel the same way. I'd prefer it if you didn't contact me with this kind of stuff again. So I'm convinced that this has got to be Matt writing the emails. I'm going back to the website. And now here's the thing, is that now for me, it's not just the one Tumblr. It's all of Tumblr. Okay, these are all her pages. And then pretty soon it's every web page I click on. is actually about this in some way. And it doesn't matter what it was, it doesn't matter how different the content was from the idea of a girl writing to me specifically or writing about me specifically. I'm talking news, world events, whatever. I'm reading it as sort of a code. You know, this is code now, right? That she's partially responsible for, and that God is putting in front of me the ability to read through this, that she actually does love me. And that not only is Matt intercepting her emails and writing them back, but he's aware of this whole ordeal. He's aware of Kim's feelings for me. And, he's being abusive to her as well as controlling her emails. And her only outlet is to use Tumblr and MySpace and these little websites that she's managed to make, to express her undying love to me. None of these websites were hers. Absolutely not. And she did not have a crush on me. So, hold on, I'm getting a low power mode thing. So I'm reading everything as this. I'm looking out the window, and it might as well be a love letter from her or something telling me, yes, you're going to move to the South and marry Kim. But now I'm getting the impression from these that she's pregnant also, okay? She's pregnant with his child, but she loves me and she's in this terrible situation, and he's beating her now. Okay, by this point, let's say we're getting into mid to late October, all right? I was fully manic by this point. My girlfriend had moved out of the apartment. I was spending all of my time on the computer, all of my time reading these websites and being convinced it's her, writing her emails to the point where she had to block me, writing him emails, listen to me, kind of grabbing him by the collar through email, through text, like, listen to me. You need to take your hands off her. And pregnant or not, I'm going to take over from here. Can you imagine getting these emails? And, but to me, it's totally real. Like, I'm reading the signs online. I'm reading the signs in the sky. I'm reading the signs in, the wood pattern of the floorboards, that this is an absolute truth. And I was pursuing it. And I was pursuing it hard, You can't tell the difference. When you're delusional, it's just, this is what's happening. The same way you're watching this video right now, like, if you think I'm talking directly to you, you're delusional, right? But there are videos where people are talking directly to them, and that's a normal apprehension to have. But this is not that. It's really just, your reality is so distorted, and it gets really, let's say, like, funneled into everything supports the delusion. Okay, everything that happens. So I'm writing so much to her. I'm writing so much to him. I'm threatening him. I'm threatening to fly down to where he is, and, I don't know. I guess assault him or something like that, in order to protect my love, Kim. She's, by this time, just frankly scared. She doesn't know what's going on. And I should mention that these 4 people represented my absolute closest friends. Okay? I was disorganized because I was manic. And when I say disorganized, people who aren't familiar with that, when you're manic, you're disorganized. It means that, like, you're going to call the wrong number. You're going to send text to the wrong people. You're going to lose your lighter 10 million times in over 5 minutes. Anybody out there who has bipolar disorder, who, smokes cigarettes or anything else like that, you're losing your lighter, your pen, your shoes, everything. You're disorganized. Well, I had kept this secret from Jess, the girl that I loved and was living with when I was healthy, until I accidentally sent her one of these emails that was meant for Kim. And in this email to Kim that went to Jess, it said, it's like, I am not in love with Jess. I have been waiting for you the whole time. She's just been a holdover, all these terrible things. And I sent it directly to her because I was disorganized. You're not really getting anything done. People have this idea about mania where it's like, you're just nonstop achieving or something like that. You're staying up all night when you're writing a book or doing all this work, doing 6 months work in 3 weeks. No, you're just like a shotgun blast of insanity where that goes anywhere, and you're blind firing. Because when you're not organized, you can't do these sort of, like, let's say, executive function tasks like, okay, I'm writing this email, this is going to there, this is the subject line. Everything is just sort of pouring out of you and pouring out of the delusion. I was fully in the grips of it. I could not believe anything that I got from either Kim or Matt, because Matt had stepped in by this point and said, stop writing my girlfriend. Like, I don't know what is wrong with you, but stop writing my girlfriend, And she had said to me, stop writing me. And I didn't buy it. I thought the whole thing was she's in some sort of like very controlling, abusive relationship where he won't let her get out of it, and all of the texts and emails are coming from him. Well, after I sent that to Jess, when I sent this terrible email, saying, Jess is just, it's been a waste of time. I've been in love with you. I feel the same way as what I've read in all your beautiful web posts. She had the unfortunate experience of having me read that. She called my brother, and my brother actually is a psychiatrist. And after my brother talked to me, it took him about 15 seconds of speaking on the phone with me to say, you are manic right now, and you need to go to a hospital. You need to go to a doctor or something. You're not hearing that when you're manic. If you're manic and someone tells you you're manic and you say, okay, let's go to the doctor, you're not manic. Okay? You're going to argue like crazy. And that is exactly what I did, folks. I just went, I went absolutely insane. It was like I was setting off a nuclear bomb in my social life and with everyone that I loved closest. He was like, you need to get to a hospital. Obviously the girlfriend is done then. Jess is out of the picture at that point. She's not understanding what's going on. She's getting an email from me accidentally where I'm telling her that she doesn't mean anything, and that, I'm all about Kim. Matt, at the same time, had reached out to my brother because we all went to school together. I'm telling you this, these were my best friends, so they knew my family and everything. And he tells my brother what's going on. Cormac is like writing all these emails. He's threatening me. He will not leave Kim alone, etc. Matt even got Kim on the phone to my brother to say, I don't know what's going on with Cormac, but he is really sort of he's off the chain. There's something going on with him. He will not leave us alone about this beautiful love he's discovered everywhere on the internet, the papers, and in the shape of the clouds. Whatever, it was there. That's the nature of delusions. So I had ruined the relationship with my then girlfriend, Jess, who I probably would have married, I think, had this manic episode never happened. I spent years after this, like, in the worst regret. And I know people, and if you out there have bipolar disorder and you've done something similar than this, I know you know how I feel. And try to forgive yourself, there's a greater plan. I know it's the worst thing ever. It's the worst thing ever, because you lose people you love. You lose your social circle. You lose credibility. You lose respect. Everything when you have a manic episode. But she was out of the picture then. She said, I'm not coming back to the apartment. All right? There's something wrong with you now. I'm going to stay with my mother. I'll check in. And I said, yeah, fine, whatever. I'm clearing out anyways. I'm moving to the South to be with Kim. Despite everybody telling me, including all the parties, that this was not going on. I was still convinced that Kim was under duress, she was under threat, and that she was pregnant with Matt's kid, who I'm going to have to raise. Which would have been fine with me at the time, in that state. I said, okay, this is what we're going to do. You're being beaten and you're pregnant by, an abuser, but you want to keep the baby and we'll raise it. She wasn't pregnant, by the way. And he wasn't abusing her, to my knowledge. I don't know, because we've never spoke again. And during this time, a lot of bipolar people will understand this too. Not only was I sending emails to the wrong places that were full of the most disgusting, sappy content. And when I say disgusting, I don't mean anything, vulgar or sexual or graphic. I mean disgusting, so sentimental, so disorganized and hard to read. And, one sentence is going 60 miles per hour for, 3 pages or something, bearing my soul. And so I'm sending messages all over the place in my phone, my email. I'm calling the wrong numbers and saying this. But the reason why I'm staying so secure in my belief is because I'm going back to Tumblr. I'm going back to these other websites. I'm going back to, all these things. Even, past emails from other people who I had never seen, but I had just communicated with about art stuff. Oh, that was actually her. That was actually her. This is her all trying to reach out while she's, under the threat of Matt, And I'm kind of glazing this over a little bit, or but Matt was my best friend in college. We were roommates. I probably had the most fun with anybody I've ever had with Matt. We shared everything. We were in the same fraternity. We did everything together. We were buddies. We were best friends. We were probably best friends. And, that was it. Because I had also become aggressive, right? So I have all this love in me, but I'm manic now. I'm delusional. I am not sleeping by this point. I remember that feeling specifically of being I was thinking I was healthy. People are telling me I'm not healthy. But I remember being I can't sleep. I cannot sleep. And I was not sleeping. I remember trying to take clonazepam to sleep. It was not working. And it was I just entered this sort of distorted realm where, time changed and my memory changed and my perception of things changed. And everything was magical. At the same time, it was as if I was discovering the world for the first time. But what was really happening was I was mentally ill. I was destroying my life. So that last week is hard for me to remember. But I remember I was very aggressive towards Matt. We got on the phone a couple times, and I didn't want to hear anything that he had to say about, what are you talking about? She's not pregnant. She's not writing you. I'm not doing anything. Where I was, you got how you have things on your best friend that you'd never bring to them or whatever, but you could use against them, or you'd never insult your best friend in this way, secrets he had told me or things like that. And I was so aggressive at that time that I was we got on the phone and I was hey, listen to me, bud, this is what's happening, you beep, 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 and all your secrets, very aggressive. We have not spoken again. It's been 17 years from that message. There's about a week left in the Midwest before I go to the South on my journey to see my long lost love who's still reaching out to me through Tumblr. There's about a week left, and I did not sleep, and I was falling apart. Though I could tell at the same time I was falling apart. Like I didn't know what was up from down. I knew I wasn't sleeping. I just destroyed that relationship forever. They had set up specifically things like, remember people used to use AIM back in like the early aughts, and they set up in that last week an AIM conversation that was to be in real time between me and Kim. Jess is out of the picture. She is broken, devastated from this, and I was not sympathetic at all. And that's not me. Your personality changes, right? It really does. I was like, whatever, I don't care. Deal with it. This is like a divine love or something. And she took that about as harsh as it was, because it was. And they set up an AIM conference for us. My brother, Matt, and Kim set up an AIM conference where it was going to be Kim talking to me in real time through instant messenger, telling me that she does not love me, that this is fake. Well, we did that, and of course, in my mind, I'm like, this is fake. This is fake. It took about 2 seconds for me to go, that was fake. That was actually Matt. And people were through with it by then. By then, they were just receiving the messages, ignoring them, blocking me where they could, because I wouldn't stop, right? And for me then, it was time to leave the Midwest and pursue my dream in the South. So I booked a ticket going to, my brother lived in Georgia at the time, and I was going to stay with him and go meet my long-lost love. And it gets so much worse from here if you just tune in to part 2 coming up right now. Thanks, guys. Be easy on yourself and be forgiving to those who who have bipolar disorder. Thank God for mental illness. Signing out, coming back with part 2.